Well, thank you, Mr. President. I do have some good news from the minority party. The minority disagrees with the committee's due pass recommendation and therefore disagrees with SB 358. The minority party believes that SB 358 violates the Georgia Constitution by upsetting the separation of powers between the Secretary of State and the State Election Board. The Secretary of State is a constitutional officer and elected by the people of Georgia, and the Constitution gives the Secretary the power to oversee elections and, most importantly, the duty to receive and certify elections under the Georgia Constitution, Article 2, Paragraph 2, and Georgia Constitution, Article 9, subsection 2, B, 2, and G. And on the contrary, the State Election Board was created through statute and is not mentioned in the state constitution. Should this body want the State Election Board to have power, then that means that it should work with the minority party, because that would require a 2/3 majority to enshrine this body in the state constitution. However, this election board was created by statute and is not in the Constitution. Unlike the Secretary of State, the State Election Board members are not elected. Instead, they're members that are appointed and are political operatives who are politically unaccountable to the people of this state. So it is unprecedented in Georgia law for an unelected board to have oversight and power over an elected constitutional officer. That power rests with the voters of this state, and they have the power to hire and fire each of us. SB 358 is the result of a small group of folks who did not feel that the 2020 election was legitimate, who continued to peddle this narrative about the legitimacy of that election. This bill would further weaponize election deniers in this state by preventing the Secretary of State from certifying the 2024 election if the result does not go their way. For these reasons, we disagree with the committee's recommendation. And in closing, Mr. President, I would say this: to give somebody investigative powers, we have a fine law enforcement agency, and that is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And they investigate matters that affect the executive branch as well as the legislative. So, Mr. President, it would behoove us to further grant that law enforcement agency the power and the authority to handle these type of investigations because they're not politically appointed. They are career men and women who serve in law enforcement, and we trust the judgment of law enforcement, and we should trust them to do their job, not the will of those that have been politically appointed that are not accountable to any voters in this state. And so with that, Mr. President, this is the minority's opposition to SB 358, and I will yield the well.